And I'd like to point out a few things as we get started here. First, I've been a research scientist here at Oak Ridge National Laboratory for 17 years before I went over to the dark side to science education. I now work for ORISE, but what I'm trying to do here today is help you get something other than just a research experience while you're here on your internship. Regardless of the program that you're here, we want you to have research. That's fundamental. But also, we hope that you will kind of move up the professional food web through time, staying in the area of science one way or another. And to do that effectively, there's a lot of things you can learn around the edges of science, around that research that will help you in the future stay engaged in the professional community of science. So this is one of those sessions, lunch and learn sessions, that we have that we think covers one of those empty voids, so to speak, okay? And volunteerism in science is a pretty important topic. It is generally not covered in other areas, but understanding the roots of volunteerism and why it's going to be valuable to you in the profession of science will serve you, I think, in good stead. So, a few things to get started. First, everybody I hope is signed in on there, up in the upper sheets, one way or another. Number two, everybody should have picked up one of these little guys. This is the manual that goes with this PowerPoint, and so pretty much all the information that's on the PowerPoint will be in here, but actually in greater detail in here. So there's some valuable information in here I think that will be good for you. If you are taking any other professional development modules, and we have several of those, how to give an effective poster, for example, effective presentations, things like that, you will get these kinds of manuals, and they have 3 holes punched in them. You all know what that's for, right? Say yes. Collect all those things and keep them in a 3-ring binder, because this is kind of a collection of professional development information that will generally help you in the future as you kind of do your deliverables and hopefully beyond. So, what's this volunteerism in science business all about? Here's what we're trying to do today. This is pretty simple. I've only have 17 slides, not very long at all. So I'm going to be a little bit chatty about some of the slides because that's how we're going to best convey the information. I'm hoping for some dialogue and interaction here along the way too. But we want to mostly become experienced or familiar with professional expectations in the area of science about volunteerism. Understand that business so that you know when and how and why volunteering is important. 2, we want you to understand the range and breadth of volunteering activities that you could and probably should get involved with to enhance your professional career. I'll explain why that's valuable to do those kind of things. And then we're going to offer some guidance and tips on volunteerism, things that you can do or should do along the way to kind of help protect yourself so you don't get in over your head and volunteer for more than you can reasonably get done. Those are also important kinds of problems. So we'll cover these 3 areas. If there's any questions along the way, great. Shout them out here. I'm deaf in one ear, can't hear well out of the other. I've got 2 microphones going, but we'll kind of get the questions worked with as we go, okay? And since we only have 17 slides, we'll probably be done on time or a little early. Volunteering is, this is a definition you can work with here, giving of your time and or expertise without expectation of payback. That's important. You can do a lot of things for money or for some kind of remuneration, and if you know that that's part of the deal, that's not really volunteering. You're getting something back out of it and you know what that is up front. Volunteering is without that expectation of payback. So it's kind of a weird way of doing business, but it's an important part of doing business. You'll find that volunteering is frustrating. How many of you have already volunteered? Raise your hands high if you've volunteered for something. Okay. Of those hands that are up there, keep them up for a moment. How many of you have volunteered for something in the area of science, broadly speaking? Even better. And of those hands, how many of you have been frustrated? Okay, 100%. And probably you're also finding that volunteerism is rewarding. So it's this strange kind of dichotomy here of rewarding and frustrating at the same time. I'll say to you, as you develop professionally, just learn to deal with that. It's got both of those pieces to it, and wallowing in ambiguity and frustration and pleasure at the same time is all something you just get comfortable with doing as part of your business of being in the area of science. Now, I like metaphors, similes, and things like that a lot. I use them in my writing a lot. So I'll tell you right here, my simile for today is science is like Swiss cheese. Okay? It's tasty. It's rewarding. But it is full of holes. Chock full of holes. And that Swiss cheese characteristic of science is partly what drives the need for volunteerism. When your mentors go out and get a big pot of money to do a piece of work, they always overpromise for the amount of things they can actually get done. That's a fact. You have to do that kind of thing. Or the costs go up along the way, and so you're running a little under budget, which means you short sheet some areas. But the bottom line is when you do science, you're going to have holes left in the project that you set out to do. You never get it all done to your satisfaction. So what do? You get graduate students or research assistants or interns to help fill the holes. That's what happens in the area of science. It happens at every level of science. And so volunteerism to help fill those holes is a really important position. It's a really important fact. And that's how science advances, in part by using a lot of volunteers in there to kind of help do the things that otherwise wouldn't get done. Keep that in mind. It's no shame involved with volunteering to get a piece of work done. So, in the context of sharing, which is sort of what volunteerism is all about, sharing your expertise or time without expectation of payback. In the context of sharing, we want you to learn to volunteer rationally. That is, know what you're getting into before you go there from here, at least a little bit, because one of the really bad things you can do in terms of volunteering is overcommitting. I'll probably emphasize this twice or three times during the presentation here. But the problem with overcommitting is if you say, yeah, I'll do that thing in the area of science, and you are unable to get it done because other time commitments happen or things happen or you just can't get that thing done, you develop a little bad reputation right there. And you don't want that to happen. You're damaging yourself professionally quite a bit if you take on more than you can accomplish. So as you go up the food web professionally, you're doing everything you can to build your creds up as a scientist. That means publishing, that means getting internship positions, that means doing this, doing that, volunteering in science-related areas, and all of those things you've got to be successful. Don't overcommit, because then you're going to be unsuccessful, and nobody's happy with that. That means when a volunteering opportunity comes at you, look at it carefully. And what should you do in terms of considering? Please, what's the number one thing you do in science, folks?
Ask questions.
Ask questions, yes. Okay? Volunteering inevitably is going to be you in working with somebody or somebody's ideas. So you need to kind of interface with the people, not just through cell phones, not just through emails, things like that, but interface with the people a little bit to make sure you're getting done what needs to get done. And that means asking the questions about that role and expectations, clarifying your expectations and their expectations about that volunteer service. Hugely important. Okay, so here's some things that you can do. 4 main categories of areas that I think pretty much anybody can do in the area of science. And these are, you can think of these as a hierarchy of scales, basically, of areas that you can volunteer for to do yourself good. 1, you can give back to your profession through a professional society. Think about that one for a moment. How many of you presently are already members of some professional society? Big chunk. You are so far ahead of where I was at that age, it's unreal. Okay? Anybody here know what the #1 professional society is in the world, science-wise? American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. That's a huge one. 50,000 members, 500,000 members, something like that. It's a very big number. Okay, and they're the ones who publish Science magazine and things like that. So they're some of the big rollers out there. But there's a lot of other professional societies, meteorology, everything from A through Z. Botanical Society of America, the Herpetological Society of America, the Malaysian Journal of Tropical Rainforests or something like that, all kinds of societies. And what you can do is find those societies that match your interest areas professionally, and then look carefully at what they're doing, scout them out on the web, find out who their members are, their officials, the president, vice president, the media contact, or whoever. And you can find, usually on most websites for professional societies, you can find a place where you can volunteer. Not too shabby. That way you're putting your efforts directly into a professional society of your interest. And it necessitates your willingness to ask questions. What can I do to help? What's the right way to do here? Who do I need to contact? You start asking those questions and you will start professionally developing your personal network within that society. It takes a very short amount of time and not so much effort to become a member in really good standing in a professional society by putting your effort into that society. And they always have needs because science is like Swiss cheese, okay? Okay, so that's one. Find your favorite professional society and do that thing. Number two, you can give back to science in the area of science education. Now, that's sort of what I'm doing, except that I'm getting paid for it, so it's not really volunteering. But I'm a volunteer presenter today because I'm not getting anything special for that. Okay, but volunteering to help in the area of science education is important for the following kinds of reasons. Probably all of you are here today because some professor someplace talked to you or you talked to them a little bit about what might be good for you to develop professionally. Perhaps. The role of mentors in the area of science is very important. You've got a mentor here at O&L. You can go to them and probably should go to them at some time along in your internship program and talk to them about what to do next, to how to maximize your experience here and what would be good steps thereafter to advance your professional career. You can do that through the area of science education. Many opportunities to do that. You can pick up things to do valuably because you, as STEM educated people, are already far ahead of most other people in the world. Your understanding of science, engineering, technology, math is far greater than the average. So you've got something to offer. Imagine going to a middle school, helping out some science education programs there, or a high school. You're going to know a lot more than many of the teachers do already about those particular areas of science. So, realize that you've got a lot to share. You may not even think about that thing, but science education is hugely important. There's an annual event here at Oak Ridge, sponsored by the Department of Energy, called the Tennessee Science Bowl. They need 230 volunteers every year to run that thing. I know that because I used to help direct that program, and I'd have to find the volunteers. It is not easy finding 230 volunteers around here, but we do it. And so those kind of actions happen all over the country, so wherever you go back and wherever you end up next in your professional career, you can stop, take a look around you, see what's there as far as science education needs, and step forward and offer some of your contributions to those kinds of areas. That's helpful. Number three, you can give back to your community. Now, what does this mean? What is community? I'll use community in this case to mean the people and the place around where you live. I live in Little Lenore City, 15 miles from here south. It's a small community, something like 8,000 people, not too big. What do I do as a volunteer? I serve on the solid waste commission service down there for the county as a Lenore City representative, not because I get anything out of it, but because I know something about waste disposal more than the average person does in that city area or in the county. So I volunteer to say, yeah, I'll help out there. That's a good thing to be doing. Contributing back because I have some knowledge in an area, I'm sharing that kind of with the community. You can do that same kind of thing in many different ways because communities have different kinds of STEM-related activities. or science-related activities, always. You can pick up a place where there's a creek and help monitor or track conditions in that waterfall, watershed kinds of services. There never have enough staff members in a community to take care of the problems that need to be taken care of that are STEM-related problems. So with your expertise, you can volunteer there and be helpful. You can also give back to the larger community. In this case, I'll just classify larger community as something beyond the community in which you live. And we have some good examples of that. We'll cover those in a few moments here. Anybody here serving the Peace Corps yet? Probably one or several of you will do that someday in the future. That's a larger community where you're going outside your comfort zone, outside of your place where you live, and giving some of your expertise out there in a way that'll help somebody else in a larger sense. Okay, professional society. Let's talk about that. We're going back now to that professional society link a little bit. I want to make clear that as you move up the food web in the area of science, you will probably become a member of one or several professional societies. And as we noted, there are opportunities to volunteer there. That's a good thing. But there are also expectations by professional societies that are not volunteers, but things that you will have to do as a professional member of the society. For example, AAAS or some of those kinds of places, they will ask you to become not just a member where you pay dues, but you also put in time reviewing the papers that are submitted to that journal. So you're likely to become a paper reviewer, a manuscript reviewer. So those kind of obligations and expectations of service from these members goes above and beyond those of volunteering per se. I will point out too that one of the most powerful things you can do here during your appointment and afterwards is that of professional networking. So volunteering will put you in a beautiful place with respect to developing your professional networks. I guarantee you that, and we're going to go through an example of that one later too, I believe. But like anything else, no overcommitting, so scatter it out carefully before you do that thing. Now, back to that education-focused volunteering role that you can take on. Two things of note there. One is that the range of opportunities is so large you can pick something which is short and you fit into it, or a longer duration, your choice. Anybody here have an opportunity to step up and build, for example, a chess club at a school, a middle school or high school? Great. That's an excellent kind of thing. Lots of advantages to doing that to the kids. Did you find it to be fun? Yep. Good thing too. Okay, but that's a longer term thing. You're putting in there, you're going to be there week after week after week through time, kind of making sure that that thing happens. But you can also find, like the Science Bowl effort or activity that I mentioned before, it's a 1 or 2 day shot, and so it's a very much more contained event. Some of those things, though, will require background checks. If you're going to be interfacing with a lot of students, for example, the school may say, well, we have to have a background check on you to make sure that you're not going to be doing something silly with our students. So in that case, just expect it. It can be part of what you have to do. When you're volunteering back to your community, you would be surprised, I think, at the number of kinds of opportunities available. This is just a quick harvest off a Google site, off of Google, looking at volunteer opportunities in Knoxville area. You could do this for Oak Ridge, you can do it for any area around where you live, and you can find literally dozens of opportunities. Some of them are just not going to be suitable for you. That's fine. But be prepared to kind of scout them out and see what is available. There's a great deal of information. In the larger community roles that I mentioned, I was in the Peace Corps for 2 years, Ghana, West Africa, and I'll say this about that kind of thing. Several things about that a little bit. Peace Corps was a great experience. I went into it with the idea that I have an opportunity to help change the world. Wrong, okay? I found out that it changes the person, but it doesn't change the world. It changes how you look at the world. So, Peace Corps is an example. It's a longer term kind of deal. 2 years is a general commitment kind of length of time. I said I would like to go down to Peru first, Ecuador second, any place in South America third, and they sent me to Africa. So, you pays your money, takes your choices, and then whatever happens, happens. You don't necessarily always get your choices when you're volunteering. You can define it a little bit, but not always exclusively on your terms. Here's another thing. There's a lot of opportunities which are the longer term, larger scale kinds of volunteering activities outside the Peace Corps. Look them up. The World Bank, and we'll have an example I'll show you here, and it's in your lab, your little notebook thing here too. There are some really good opportunities to go overseas to some other country and work on World Bank problems, for example. The World Bank will fund lots of dollars into some activities in various countries, like to set up a dam or something like that to provide irrigation water for local citizens. So there's a lot of activities that way, and they depend heavily on those volunteer roles. Check them out and see what might work for you there. Another one more local, STEM AmeriCorps, that's a good one to look into. Citizen science activities. How many of you are involved or have been involved in citizen science activities? One, not many. That's interesting. There are thousands, literally thousands of citizen science projects going on now, sponsored by lots of different science projects to which you could plug in and fit. They range from astronomy through bird watching kind of things, through Cornell University's birding programs, dozens of opportunities. What they need basically are people to help collect data on different kind of areas, very prescribed kind of things, so you can feed your little piece of data in with hundreds of other people feeding in data, so you're sort of making a metadata pile here that are then later analyzed and brought up, through some science route. But seriously, this is a good one to look at because there's so many kinds of opportunities here. It's really worth your while. Okay, this is an example from the World Bank showing one of those larger kinds of opportunity things. Probably their website has even been updated now. This is almost a year old, I believe, on here. But look at the outreach program here. They have over 10,000 staff and retirees, 25,000 volunteers needed. Okay, not too shabby. Now, the World Bank and the Peace Corps, for example, don't just expect you to go in there and do your job that they assign to you. They do give you some remuneration. So it is like a job, but it's something like an internship appointment too, because it's not a salary, okay? But you come out of the program and you have enough change available to kind of get yourself going in a new direction. Here's another big plus for these larger ones. When I was going through, I got my master's degree, and then I had a critical thing to think about. Had my bachelor's, safe and secure, had my master's, safe and secure, and then I had to think, was I willing to go that next notch and spend 3 to 5 years doing a PhD? I knew at that time that to me, a PhD would be a major piece of work, a major commitment to my future. And I wasn't frankly sure whether I had the gumption or the fortitude to kind of go and do that thing. And I'm a slow thinker. I take things in information-wise and I process them. It takes me a little while to do that. So when I came out with a master's, rather than just taking a summer vacation and doing nothing, I said, let's go into the Peace Corps. I'll spend 2 years there while I think about what I want to do next. And it turns out that the Peace Corps or things like the World Bank, when you volunteer that way, at that level, that's a safe thing to do in terms of when you come out, you are still hooked in enough to academia that you can go that way without a problem. Programs will accept you willingly, and sometimes that's viewed as an advantage to have had that experience, so it can serve as a good stepping stone while you make some kind of decisions important to your professional career life. So it's a good stepping stone that way. Okay, there's a Peace Corps one, kind of give you a range on that one. You can even combine graduate school and Peace Corps service. How about them apples, okay? Think about it. There are all kinds of interesting opportunities out there if you poke around and start looking in the zone of volunteering. There's the STEM AmeriCorps one. They're always looking for donations, but look at there, the Sign Up Now button. Anybody here adventuresome enough to click on that and see where it goes? Don't do it on ORNL, okay? Do it on your home PCs, just in case. Okay, the citizen science projects, I've mentioned those now, and let's define those a little bit more here. This is where a lot of people volunteer either their time or their computer resources, for example. When they are doing a search for city, that kind of search, what they needed is massive amounts of computer power so people could donate their computer to do off-hour work on behalf of that program, scanning things and kind of working, so you get a little bit of CPU time that you're donating that way. But there's individual time, 1,000 different kind of science projects going on to which you could relate, make some new friends, interact, learn some things you didn't know before, and get kind of plugged into that whole level of professional development that's pretty interesting. You can do it at the individual level, at the team level. You can encourage a group of students to kind of gain involvement with that kind of thing as a group. Let's take it on as a school project, for example. A lot of things. And there's this nice little website down here, scistarter.com. That's worth checking out because that's sort of a portal to many of those citizen science projects. You can get a whole long list of them there and take a look at it and see if any kind of match your interest. Now again, I'm not advising you to take something on which is above and beyond your essential workload. You've got to get that stuff done first, and you want to do a good job on the volunteering too. But when you find that you do have enough time you can sink into it, take on some role to kind of bolster that side of your resume. Now, here's a few tips. Number one, and this is very important, it's easy to forget about. Keep a written record of your volunteering work. Everything you do in the world of volunteerism, if it's a science-related volunteering, will count beneficially on your resume. So as a single line item on there, I volunteered for the following things, zzz, 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 zzz. You can do those kind of things as long as you have enough truth in there and credibility in terms of documentation. They need to know what you volunteered for and when that happened. It's a nice line item too to be able to say for each activity you did about how many people were associated with that activity. I oversaw the work of a dozen students doing this kind of a science project, for example. Okay, so you get the numbers of people involved, the dates when that thing happened, and the name of that thing. Those are 3 pieces of critical information which are easy to forget unless you've got some documentation about that kind of thing. Persist, and this is a really important one here. Believe in that power of chance. You would be astounded at what kind of things turn up when you step into a new volunteering role, step out of your comfort zone into a new environment, and you start making friends with a few new people that you didn't have before, a new science area, for example. The element of chance just works in that area most magically. So if you are receptive to the good things that can come out of those kinds of new exposures and work with them, you'll get a lot of benefit out of there. Just trust a little bit that you will gain from that role of being open to chance. You can make things work on your behalf that way too. You can make it a professional networking chance. When you do something like in a volunteer role for the first time, have something with you. Have your business cards with you. Okay? You never know who's going to get one. Okay? You never know what's going to come out of those things. So have some business cards with you, and you go to a new role, enjoy it. Trade some names, and also do this thing. Have a notebook with you. Doesn't have to be a little write in the rain one, but I like it because I work with water a lot, and so it preserves my writing. What's the other thing you need? Something to write with. Take some notes. Put down people's names, phone numbers, kind of thing like that. Say, oh, you're going to have a meeting on that professional group next week, as you say, on Tuesday? I'd like to be there. Volunteer yourself for those kind of things, but keep the information so it doesn't slip out of your head. So those are really good resources to have with you, and ask the questions too. Again, for the last time, I think, don't overcommit. You can gain a little traction on anything, and get into an area, but don't promise more than you can deliver. Now, benefits of volunteering. Well, obviously, one big benefit is the people that you get to help. You're doing something for somebody else, and if they have need of that kind of assistance, that's a plus. They're benefiting. But you would be surprised at the benefits that accrue to the individual doing the volunteering as well. Did you know, for example, those people who volunteer are actually healthier and have better work attitudes than people who don't volunteer? That's a true fact, so to speak. So you can gain a little health, have a more cheerful overall demeanor by investing some of your time in helping others. Not a bad plan. Double winners. So, volunteering is good for you and for others. I would like to know that you are planning your kind of activities and think about it and making sure you don't just forget about it. Don't let it fall off your radar screen. Keep it as part of the things you want to do down the road. Do it well with great enjoyment. Be very persistent, because many times when you step into a situation, it doesn't work right the first time. For one reason or 55 other reasons you can't think of, the volunteering effort you're trying to do isn't working. That's okay. Stay with it a while. Back up a little bit, try a different route, but be persistent. This is a great area of your professional development that you can practice with to make it better, because it's going to take some tenaciousness and some consistent effort to make it so. Watch for chance and relish it. You'd be astounded at how many new people you will meet in a new environment that have overlapping interests that you never knew about, and you wouldn't have learned about that without that kind of volunteering effort. Log your efforts, write them down, keep track of those things, and then help spread the word to others. When you get a chance to do so, hey, I'm volunteering for this kind of thing, let me tell you about it a little bit, because it helps then spread the word about that role and that activity. Any questions now? I'll have that little dwell time out here. Let it hang there for a moment. Any questions? Yes?
If you're volunteering as like a professional engineer, maybe kind of PE license, where do you draw the line between like a consultation where you might need to charge a small fee for liability's sake? Where do you draw that line when you engage that?
I will answer with the universal science question answer, which is it depends. Okay? It depends on, it gives you enough chance to think about all the things it depends on. It sort of depends on the magnitude of the thing and whether they are coming to you because they need a piece of work done for which you are qualified to do, and you can say to them, okay, is this a job? Okay, is this a paid for task, or are you looking for a volunteer effort? You can ask those questions. Be bold. You need to ask a little questions, probe them a little bit to find out what the expectation is. So again, questions, expectations. You've got to work with that a lot up front. Otherwise, you can get tangled up into a situation where you get resentful if you're volunteering and they didn't want that, or worse yet, you thought you weren't volunteering, but you are volunteering. Okay, so that can be a problem area. Questions, expectations. Any more questions? Yes?
What can you do if you do overcommit yourself?
What can you do what?
If you do overcommit yourself.
Oh, you start with apologies, okay? That's the first thing you can do. Don't let it run any longer. As soon as you get a hint that you've got a problem, immediately stop and start saying, wait a minute. I think I may have done something here I shouldn't have done. I think I may have overcommitted. Start backing up. Give them some room to maneuver it. You can then ask questions like, can we rearrange some things here, like the timeline or the amount of the deliverables or whatever's involved, okay, to renegotiate the conditions, as it were, to make it so you can get the thing done. That usually means more time or a smaller scope on what you're contributing. But the rule of thumb is don't let that go any longer, not a minute longer than you know you got a problem, okay? And it's also a good idea to ask questions along the way as you're volunteering to kind of keep those expectations in line. Is this going to be doing what you need here? Do we need more than this or less than this kind of thing? So you can kind of self-calibrate as you go so that you are less likely to overcommit. Don't commit on the big thing. Say, well, let me get into it and we'll tell you more in a week or so. So you kind of get into it, test it out. Yes?
I'm just gonna say, I volunteer for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and they're in dire need right now for big brothers. They got tons of big sisters, but very little big brothers.
Why do we have no big brothers? What's wrong with this picture? Don't we have some big brothers in here someplace? We could. Okay? So you might lodge that. Check it out with Facebook, the little intern Facebook kind of thing, and ask the question. See if you can't get a little bit of help on that one. You might find a volunteer or two. That's a good thing to know about. Yes?
So as far as networking goes, you're at a conference and you've met somebody, you've had a conversation. I guess you would ask them for their, the email, business card, put up or whatever. Is there, a next step after that? You send them a follow-up call, email. What's the next step?
I would generally do emails, mostly because in what I do in my job is like 99% emails. I mean, I just do massive numbers of emails every day. And I'm a quick writer, and so I can communicate effectively that way. You sort of need to kind of understand the preferred mode of communication by the person you're working with and try to tailor your response to that mode when possible. But yes, I would always do, it's always better to risk a follow-up than to not do the follow-up. Because if they don't want to do the follow-up with you, they'll let you know that. You can read between the lines. But if you fail to do that thing, then it's a problem. So err on the side of over-communicating. That would be my guess. Yes? Oh, way in the front, sure.
So we're always told that we need to have volunteer experience, that it's expected of us, we need to have it on the resume, and it's really important. So the definition of volunteering was doing something without the expectance of payback. So we are expecting it to boost our resume, we're expecting it to boost our career. How is it exactly volunteer?
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as firm as that. When I'm looking at resumes, for example, of prospective students, okay, I look to see what they've done. I don't want somebody with all 4.0, okay? I'm looking for somebody who's challenged themselves enough to get a B every once in a while. And that means, okay, they're smart, but they're ready to take a licking when they have to, and they keep going. So that's one thing, GPA. On the volunteering kind of thing, I look at the range of activities that they've been volunteered for. I don't necessarily expect to see anything in the volunteering category, but it's pleasant when I see them in there. And it's particularly pleasant when I see them with some numbers, like when, what, how many. Those are important kind of things. I think in graduate school, there is probably an expectation, an admittance that they look carefully at the volunteering kind of roles and make sure you've done some of those kind of things. And I would ask you, why? What does volunteering do for you that would make you more valuable as a graduate student, for example? Think about that. There may be some hidden benefits to you of volunteering that are so dominant that they really do drive expectations at that graduate school acceptance level. They're looking for evidence of creativity. They're looking for evidence of persistence, for people who are willing to give of themselves to a cause. Could be science, could be something else. So yes, there's probably an expectation of having volunteering experience, but that shouldn't be the motivator for your volunteering. To me, being able to put that information on your resume is a benefit to you. But I don't see where the expectation plays out exactly. It's more like, this is something you probably want to do if you really want to get ahead in the world of science, is to kind of develop that expertise and the range of interactivity capabilities that you can only get through volunteering. So I understand the argument a little bit. I'm not sure exactly that answers it, but it comes a little bit close. Any more questions? Now, I would like to point out several more things here before we wrap it up. One, in your manual, near the end, you take a flip in there. Everybody has one of these things, is that correct? The last two pages, I think, or actually last pages 21, 22, and 23, they have a volunteering checklist. This is a little resource for you. Before you step into your next big volunteering role, kind of work your way down through this list and kind of think about it and see if you're Make sure you're addressing all the right kind of points in your head before you step into it and do that thing. This will help you kind of think your way through your next volunteering role before you kind of get involved in it up to your neck, okay? So that's not a bad thing. If anybody would like to have an extra copy of the guidelines for this checklist, I've got those up here in the front. So after the presentation's done, you can come on up and get an extra one. It's just a copy of these things right here. But that may be, if you're active right now and ready to volunteer for something, rather than rip them out of your book, you can go ahead and just pick up one of those sets and use them that way. Makes it a little bit easy.